any companies who want to do business in China try to lock in Chinese consumers online. Interactive marketing is a way.
I think foreign companies today have largely failed or almost entirely failed in the Chinese market.
Google or eBay, when they come to China, they have an international, worldwide policy, but they don't customize well enough for the China market. They have to follow the US policy. They can't customize for China. They are very disappointed with the way that they're being treated in China.
In any category in China, in the cyberspace, you can't find more than 3 leading players. And beyond 3, those are very small. So competition is really, really fierce in China. You need to build your own differentiation, so you have to do something differently.
Hello and welcome to Chinalog. I'm Katie Fisher. Chinese netizens might not be as apt as Americans to tweet what they thought about that pickle on their hamburger, in part because Twitter is blocked in China, but that doesn't mean they're not spreading the word. They might post that message on the Chinese Twitter equivalent, Weibo, maybe instant message their friend on QQ, or post a video rant on Youku. Almost 500 million people in China have access to the internet. But are internet companies effectively tapping that massive market? Are they profitable? How do they make their money? Well, with me to explore the money-making side of China's social networking and video sites, Kai Lugoff, editor at iChinastock.com, a site that reports on Chinese technology firms that are publicly listed in the U.S., Dr. Marina Zhang, author of China 2.0, The Transformation of an Emerging Superpower and the Opportunities, and Stella Jin, partner at Ketone Ventures, a venture capital fund. Thank you for joining us today. Well, now we look at Twitter, we look at Facebook, we look at Weibo. We use these sites all the time, but are they really profitable? They're huge companies, but do they really have money backing them?
Well, so far I don't see any proven business models that can generate the profitabilities investors are hoping for.
I think at the moment, no, they're not profitable, but that doesn't mean they're not worth a lot of money. And that's all based on the presumption that in the future they will be able to make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And that can be many different channels, anything from social products, social advertising, to actually directing users towards e-commerce properties.
Mm-hmm. So internet companies can have a product, if you look at news, if you look at, e-commerce, something like that, then you're actually getting revenue in. But for these more broader sites, it's sometimes really hard to grasp how they're really making the money.
They can use this as a place where they promote certain products. For instance, if you are an executive of a real estate developer, you can put on promotion about the houses that you're selling, right? And you put it on your space, and people wouldn't feel it's too intimidating. I think that might be a way that people can make money in the future.
Mm-hmm. Do you see advertising playing a big role in how these companies make money?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look at the numbers. China now has, as you said, about 460 million internet users. And every year the growth is about 70, 80 million. So all those people coming to the internet, they get into the space with the concept of Web 2. So they interact with others. Mm-hmm. And they try to demonstrate their individuality through Weibo, and they try to socialize with their friends on social networking sites, and get entertainment from the video sites. Another number I want to mention is average Chinese internet users, they spend about 18 hours a week online. So that's way higher than the average worldwide. So how to capitalize on the eyeballs of those sheer number of internet users? That's a big question, I think.
And part of that is figuring out what people are doing online.
Yes. Put this way, if you walk into a university campus, you stop anybody, in their teens or early 20s, ask them, so when was the last time you watched CCTV? And the answer is very likely they will tell you you are out. Indeed, watching CCTV news is out of date.
Television. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. They're getting news, they're getting entertainment, they're socializing, everything online. So for a lot of companies, if you just use traditional media to try to advertise your products or services, you will definitely meet the whole group, a whole generation of users. And mind you, those users are very likely trendsetters in China. Mm-hmm. So that is very, very important. So any companies you want to do business in China, try to lock in Chinese consumers online. Interactive marketing is a way. If you don't do it, you can't sell anything in China. Well, not anything.
I hear the top 3 writers on microblogs. The top one gets paid for 60,000 RMB per blog. And the second one gets paid for 40,000 yuan per blog. So there's a way to generate a small amount of money. This is what I was trying to explain about the possibilities of the website, of the writers being able to write, to be able to generate revenue from that with them to earn money.
That's not bad for writing 140 characters.
Yes,
exactly.
I would be willing to do that.
Yeah, I think the highest following is somewhere about 7 million fans for the top 1 and top 2. Yeah.
And I think that's approaching
bloggers.
close to the numbers of the top Twitter users. I think Lady Gaga is somewhere around 10 million.
Right.
And
Is she
what it
number
shows, Lady Gaga is number 1 on
Okay.
Twitter. And what I think it shows is that Chinese users particularly like this one-way broadcasting format that Weibo,
Right.
Sina Weibo, has
Yes.
really pioneered here in China, which is that they can then follow all of the celebrities, even though those celebrities, of course, don't have to follow them back.
Sure.
And I think that's really catapulted Sina Weibo into the really hot spot in terms of the focus of social networks in China today.
Sure. Sina Weibo, of course, is more innovative than the Twitter itself. And mind you, 140 Chinese characters can carry something like 500 characters in English words. So you can actually communicate more substantially in Chinese with the word limit Twitter holds.
Yes, and also it has the function of Facebook to a degree where you have a personal page where you can talk about yourself. So that's more than Twitter. So that's the difference between Xinlang Weibo and Twitter.
Yes.
And does advertising pop up on these pages as well, or is this pure without advertising?
No advertisement at this moment yet, but you can foresee that.
Yeah, you can see
Right.
a lot of instances like the one you described where companies will pay celebrities to endorse particular products
Sure.
or post products, pictures of themselves using particular products.
Yes.
But then that's
advertising
the
for the
company,
platform
yeah.
or for Sina Weibo is not, monetization is not at a level that would justify its valuation. It's all based on the presumption that they will be able to make money off of it in the future.
Sure.
And that's something that Twitter has not been able to figure out yet. And I think here in China, some of the sites, though, are far more adept than their Western counterparts in terms of figuring out ways to monetize, and they're far more aggressive about it as well. That they will place advertising all over the place that a Western user would not accept.
Yeah, one more aspect about microblog, Xinlang Weibo, is that you can easily extend it to your cell phone. So people start to look at Weibo from their mobile phones and interact. And that's where you can actually generate more advertisement, one-liners type of revenue with a microblog.
Is there an element there, though? Twitter pretty much isn't connected to any other company, but Weibo is underneath Sina's umbrella.
That's
so
right.
can they kind of, filter off some funds in that direction?
That's the trick. Look at Apple's business model. It's really about a two-sided network. In China, if you build the traffic, and it's very difficult to lose, and you stay in the spot for a long time. So the first mover's advantage, it seems, is more prominent in China than in the US, for example. So you look at those first batch of internet companies in China, they're still on the first spots. And it's very difficult to build internet traffic in China. But when you do have the traffic, you really can benefit one way or another. Maybe you don't have the way to monetize your traffic, but one day you will. And of course, Sina Weibo is under the umbrella of Sina as a portal.
Yeah.
So the company can easily transport its user base from one side to the other.
Yeah.
And why would there not be first movers in like a U.S. market compared to the China market?
For example, Baidu is an internet search engine. This is a product or services very difficult to build monopoly in the market because differentiation among search engines not that great, and multi-homing costs is very low. I can use 2 different search engines simultaneously, and I don't need to pay extra. It's not like you buy a video player and you can't buy the other, right? So, but mind you, Baidu holds more than 80% of market share in internet search engine. That is incredible, and of course the government perhaps don't like it. So that's something I can't explain why. It seems the Chinese users, they have sort of longer term stickiness to those websites. When they're on there for quite a long time. You don't look very comfortable.
I was going to say, I think I agree with the walled garden or empire part of your statement, that you have certain sites. You have 3 giants in the Chinese internet, it's often said. Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba.
Right.
And then you have sort of smaller empires, but still quite large, like Sina, which hosts Weibo, Sohu, and OPI, etc. And they have these user bases, and they can promote basically any service that they want via those services. And so whenever something new comes out in the US, those sites, you can be sure, are going to copy it and adapt it to China in some way, shape, or form. That having been said, there were a number of earlier attempts at doing Twitter in China, including one called Funfo that was shut down by the government because it touched on a lot of sensitive issues in Chinese society. And it wasn't until a major portal got behind it in the form of Sina that they were able to really push it out. Although there are also other companies trying to do the same thing, namely Tencent and Sohu with their Weibo versions.
Yeah. So if you look at Sina, they have about 80 million in their microblog, right? And Tencent has 100 million, and they have all their own worlds, right? But if you look at those social networking sites, such as Kaixin and Renren, used to be called Xiaonei, the 2 social networking companies, they opened their API that their users can actually connect with each other. So those smaller players actually wanted to connect, so they have larger base for communication. So that's the difference.
But those companies were both owned by the same parent company. That's the reason they connected, right? At that point, Kaixin was actually sued and had to shut down because they practiced a pretty brutal strategy in which they copied another competitor that had a similar name, Kaixin 001, and put the website up basically to distract users. They were ordered to close, and so they piled those users back into the other site. So I think it's actually not so much the case that the Chinese internet is very open, but it may be going in that direction because Renren and Sina now do have APIs that allow third-party developers to build on top of their platforms. And I think that's something that the Chinese internet, in contrast to the US, has not figured out yet. That is how to build a platform and invite other people to join and create an ecosystem that's healthy for all of the netizens and other parties that can develop on top of it.
I agree.
You're
But
so
the
right.
problem is competition.
That's
You
right.
look at in any category in China, in the cyberspace, you can't find more than 3 leading players. And beyond 3, those are very small. So, and overall, as you said, 3 big players. But in each category, they're not more than 3. So competition is really, really fierce in China. And that actually forces the firms to be more innovative because you need to build your own differentiation. So you have to do something differently.
But does that just mean that that's going to be one big company that has all the little pieces, and then you don't need the Weibo and or the QQ and everything, or the Youku, because it's already part of that site?
Possibly. I mean, Weibo is something you can for users. You can have a longer term stickiness to the services because you manage 2 sites, 2 microblogs of your own. You can spend a lot of time, and you can create confusion among your followers. So why bother? So if you have Sina Weibo, and that's it. And that's the best way for the company to lock in customers, users' attention and time. So that is actually very, very smart strategy. That's why you can see fierce competition coming from Tencent, Sohu, because one person, I join Sina, I can't join the other one. Or you can, but you probably can't put enough time. And your identity will be split. So this is one area which I think the internet companies are fighting so hard to try to lock in customers' attention and time.
And what about foreign companies trying to enter this market as well, trying to compete with these three maybe companies that are within China?
I think foreign companies to date have largely failed or almost entirely failed in the Chinese market. And I would attribute it to two factors. One is a lack of an appreciation or understanding of local user preferences. And then I do think, secondly, that the preferential and protectionist policies of the Chinese government are very difficult in many cases for foreign companies to deal with. Either they're not allowed in the first place unless they censor a lot of their content, or it's just very difficult to compete on a level playing field.
Yeah, well, I remember I watched Robin Li, the CEO of Baidu, once said, well, it's the company's local capabilities that win the heart of investors in Wall Street. But I would say actually the company win Chinese users' heart by technology from Silicon Valley. So that's the way. The Chinese internet companies, they don't start from scratch. It's always this copy mentality. So I start something, I build something from something. So standing on the shoulders of giant, always give you better view, even better starting point. So why not? And compared to foreign firms, they start to operate in China. And of course, those companies, they're disadvantaged. They don't know what hundreds of millions internet users, what they want. And they don't know how to interact with them. And mind you, Chinese users, look at some numbers. About close to 60% of them are under the age of 30. And about 80%, 83% actually making less than 3,000 a month. And about 90% of them got the education of 12 years or less. And think about those numbers. And some of them actually, they're very close-minded. And when Google made the decision to withdraw from the Chinese market, you can see a split, a sharp split between the users in China and outside China. And inside, a lot of users actually they cheered, said, wow, that's great. You know, we kicked out this foreign competitor. But you see, those users, they are very easily to be manipulated in a very culturally and emotionally way. So that's why those companies, they pay huge amount of money to those blog writers, because a single 140 word character blog post can stir up some emotional links. And that is, I think, the trick for foreign companies. They find it very hard to master.
I think there's one other reason for companies like Google or like eBay, when they come to China, they have an international, worldwide policy, but they don't customize well enough for the China market. So I hear complaints again and again from these subsidiaries of the eBays and Google. They talk about they have to follow the US policy. They can't customize for China. And they are very disappointed with the way that they're being treated in China. So some of the companies, they say, we do our own, we do our local companies. And we can't really work with the big giants internationally, which could be successful, like say in Japan or in Europe, but are not as successful as in China.
I totally agree with you. I mean, we see a lot of multinational companies, they try to do business in China, they do fine. IBM, HP, Ericsson, you name it. But it seems internet companies, they find it's extremely hard to survive in the Chinese market. I think in the internet space, flexibility rather than efficiency is perhaps more important. Just like you need open strategy rather than closed strategy. So you need to really have flexibility rather than try to just pursue efficiency. And most companies, they're building their lead, they try to lock in their customers, build their client base. That's, I think, very important. And you follow a lot of rules and try to, on one hand, deal with the government regulations, on the other hand, deal with your head office bureaucracy, and that's quite hard.
Yeah, so the CEOs make decisions locally, right, of your own company. And the head of the general managers of a huge US company would have to deal with maybe VP or even lower level of people, and they can't get their needs met in a timely fashion.
Sure.
So they lose out.
You mentioned the regulations that the government might put on some of these sites. How much does that prevent companies from taking risks? You said that was very important as well. So where's the line?
Well, for Google and the companies, that one of the values is to we make our own rules. But that's in contrast to Chinese government. And Chinese government is very clear. We make our rules on our soil. So that's very clear. And of course, censorship is a very sensitive issue. And I think the government actually gives the companies or individuals a lot of responsibilities. You account for your own action. So self-censorship. So those firms, they can maneuver within these regulatory networks or censorship networks, are those local firms. And they know how to meet both sides of the requirements, and they can quickly figure out what are those words on the blacklist and how to do a self-censorship. So I don't think the censorship itself will stop those local firms, but that will be a block for foreign firms.
I agree with Dr. Zhang. It's very difficult to figure out the rules of the Chinese internet, in part because I think they're still being written. The government itself does not know how to address this new emerging economy. And so, let alone the companies themselves, have a tough time figuring it out. And they have to employ a lot of methods that for foreign companies, they simply would not accept. All of the social networks in China have to employ hundreds of